Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
Do you ever think, you and I talk a lot on and off the air. Do you ever see me as Chicken Little, where I'm running around complaining that the sky is falling and kind of being alarmist?
That'd be a definitive, cold, no equivocation in my voice. No.
It's one of those things that I feel like every time we talk and I have something to share, it is like I need one of those bumpers that's like the sad trombone or something like that. Yeah. I need to have one. Just, you know what? I need a button. Staples had that commercial a long time ago that you push the button and it just said that was easy.
I have one of those. Steve, not only did I have one of those, there was a period of time in my life where I would bring that along to clients, and it was a stress reliever thing, right? Like they would go in about the bad day and the things, and as soon as we figured out what we were going to do, I'd hit that button, and that was easy. And it was a mood breaker. It really was, like, caused people to calm down. I don't know if I can get you a button, but I can get you a sounder.
I need one of those to just be able to carry around in my pocket for all of the times where we talk, just because I don't have something like this. So we have another one of those situations where, I'm sure it was the global RAM shortage or it was AI or something like that, but we've got another kind of price hike on something that was fairly popular in our community.
So this is what happens when you don't own your own thing, when you rely on something else or someone else to do a thing. It's also, oh, by the way, why you should be concerned anytime a company says, we're going to do something open source, and then all of a sudden they tell you, oh, we're not going to do something open source. Those are all warning signs along the way until we get to Tuesday, May 19th. Steve, what are we talking about?
In this particular case, we are talking about Plex again. So I was a Plex pass holder before it was mainstream. And what I mean by that is I got in on like an early bird discount, like $50 way back in the day. So it premiered in like 2012 to the public for the lifetime subscription. And I was before that. So I had a long, long history with this product and actually really enjoyed it.
Can you, for somebody who maybe has been living under a rock and isn't familiar with what Plex is, can you go into what Plex is, what Plex Pass does, and what the recent change they made is?
So Plex is just it's a software server that you run yourself and point it at a bunch of your local files. So in my case, and in Noah's case, we rip our own Blu-rays and our own DVDs and we like to stash them. I like to have the full fidelity. I like to have the different audio tracks and all that sort of stuff. So there are open source advantages like MB and Jellyfin and things of that nature. And they give you we'll say a Netflix similar experience in terms of what the web UI looks like and all that. One of the things that the Plex Pass allows you to do is it allows you to use their proxy system so that you can come in from the outside and access your content. Now, in the past, there were ways for you to set that up yourself, a bunch of port forwarding and a whole bunch of fun stuff like that. But the Plex Pass made it easy, and it also made it easy for you to have multiple users and things like that. If I'm honest, I'm not really sure what the Plex Pass does this time around because I want to say I know exactly what feature drove me away from it, which was we're going to share with anyone who knows that you have Plex what you've been watching. And I was like, no, you're not. and we immediately stopped using Plex and moved to Jellyfin, and worked through kind of the growing pains with Jellyfin. Now, I don't remember when that was, but it was multiple years ago at this point.
Do you remember, and because this was not multiple years, this is maybe 2 years ago, when Plex announced that they were banning their services from all, like basically IP swaths. And so if you were in one of these, I'm going to call them gray IP areas, then your Plex server just stopped working, or the brokerage to your Plex server just stopped working?
Yeah, I remember that. Largely it was because there were a number of bad actors who were selling access to their Plex. Basically, they were pirating large amounts of stuff and taking on the risk of doing the pirating themselves, and then they were selling access to their Plex instance. And so one of the common hosters that was used was Hetzner, because it was a very low cost option to get a decent amount of storage or compute or whatever you needed. And so they just summarily blocked, I believe, all of Hetzner's IPs.
This is, again, should be very concerning to anybody who is using this. The latest price hike is 200%. So they are going to make the one-time lifetime membership go to $750. Here's what I think is most concerning, because the immediate reaction, if I'm a Plex user, is, well, I already got in on a good price, Noah, so why does that apply to me? It applies to you because your service is reliant upon Plex the business continuing. And what they're telling you without telling you is they're not profitable. They don't make enough money selling the subscriptions that they sell to continue to grow at the pace that they're growing, to continue to provide the service that they're providing at the price they're providing it for. And so I have long since been skeptical of quote unquote lifetime memberships, because the business model in and of itself isn't sustainable. If you're going to continue to exist, you have to pay people. If you have to pay people, they are not going to accept hey, I'm going to give you a salary, a one-time lifetime salary, and then you work for us for life. Like, that doesn't work. So if it doesn't work on that side of the equation, it can't work on the income side of the equation. So you basically have to bank the fact that you're going to get enough people doing the monthly recurring thing that will keep them going, and then you can ride lifetime on whatever the fee is. And what they're finding is, big shocker here, when the price point was $250 or lower, nobody bothers to do the yearly thing. They're just doing the $250 because it's just more, it just makes better dollars and cents. And so now they're raising it to $750. So if I were a Plex user, which I'm not, but if I were, I would be concerned about two things. One is anybody else, it's difficult to recommend a thing to friends or family, or be proud of a thing when your friends and family go, great, awesome, how do I set that up? Oh, right, yeah, I got in at an early time, and so I got a good price for you. It's going to be the price of a really, of like a beater car. But you're gonna have to put that aside to get this lifetime pass kind of a thing. That would not leave a great taste in my mouth. And then the other part of it is, I'd be wondering how long this keeps up before it finally topples over. So they're taking arrows from a couple different fronts. They're taking arrows from the copyright industry, who's saying this is being used for fraud. They're taking arrows now from the accountant people who are saying, hey, this business model is not sustainable. You need to fix this. And they've moved away from an open source model. They've moved into doing their own thing. And so what started as, I think, $75 back in 2014 has gone up, effectively tenfold, right? And so, and then that's in 12 years. So what is it going to look like in the next 12 years? I'm not sure. At some point, you have to start doing the math and saying, okay, so for $750, if I take that divided by 12, that's 62 months or 5 years worth of Netflix or a Hulu or a whatever, right? And so there's a trade-off there where that's going to come with the content. So you don't have to, this is just Plex. On top of that, you have to buy the content. When the cost of running the software alone starts to be equivalent to or greater than what it would cost you on a yearly basis to have the platform and the content, I just think the case gets harder and harder to make. In absence, well, for you, I guess it wasn't this. For you, it was Plex deciding to blast Scream from the Heavens what you're watching. which is weird to me that more people don't care about that. What did you end up going to?
We moved to Jellyfin, and I would say that it has been mostly okay. We have, in the browser, it's perfectly fine. I want to be absolutely clear about that. We have had no problems watching it in the browser. On our Android TV, the app is not awesome. And we've actually reverted to using Kodi with the Jellyfin plugin. So we actually run Jellyfin for Kodi in Kodi to plug into the Jellyfin backend, and we just don't use the front end at all. And that has saved a bunch of the headache. On the Apple TVs we actually have had to go with Infuse because, again, the app itself is lacking, I guess, for the best way that I can put it. And so for those devices, we've kind of had to contort ourselves a little bit. Web browser works just fine. Love it. No problems there. So, there are always compromises that you make when you make choices. And in this case, when you are choosing to self-host something, it may not be as polished as you might like it to be. And that's just the way it is.
Can you talk a little bit about what was, I guess here's what I get to. So in order, why not just use Kodi? What does the back end of Jellyfin get you?
So for some time, I was actually running just Kodi and having a distributed database so that you have like sync watch things and stuff like that. But on top of that, you can put Jellyfin on tablets and whatever, and then download the media for offline. It's better than nothing. It's nowhere near what Plex was, in my opinion, but that is the primary use case, that syncing the watch state and having the ability to download them to mobile devices.
Do you think that Kodi as the front end, MB as the back end delivers a Plex equivalent experience, or is it still, there's some room to grow there?
I mean, Kodi and Jellyfin, I think you mean to say.
Yeah, sorry.
I really, really to this day love Kodi. We use the Confluence interface. So when people say Kodi looks dated, we never see that because I've been running the same interface for like 10 years. And it works wonderfully. So is it a Plex-like experience? No, because it's Kodi, and Kodi works differently, right? There's just a different way that it's set up, but we've been using it for more than a decade. It's just fine. So
I don't know, somewhat of an animal, I guess. I'm still stuck with just plain old Kodi. I've been using it since it was XBMC. I liked it back then. I like it now. For a while when they had the little portable thing, I thought that was great. Like, I don't know, I've yet to really outgrow it. But I also come from a generation in where I didn't grow up with streaming services. I grew up with rewinding VHS before you brought them back to Blockbuster, or there was a fine if you didn't rewind the tape kind of thing. And then the little sign, be kind, rewind, right? And so to a degree, I'm used to going and finding the thing that I want to find. And really the only thing is that it's local to where you are. When you get to completion or whatever, if you're going to go do it again, you're going to start over. Just different expectations, I suppose. But it'll be interesting to watch as MB moves forward. I think that will be a helpful thing for people who are looking for an alternative, particularly if the price continues to go up. Should we get to some feedback?
Let's do it.
Our first email comes in today from, let's go to Mark. Mark writes in and says, having a new furnace AC installed, and I want a non-cloud dependent Home Assistant compatible thermostat with spousal approval. Spousal approval would be a thermostat that works completely from the wall, even though I never set up Home Assistant without internet. Home Assistant would be gravy for me later. She's very anti-smart. I don't have Home Assistant active yet, but I'm interested and want to choose something that can integrate in the future. Installer wanted to do Honeywell Red, which is cloud dependent. The HWT6 seems good, but only allows a wired remote sensor. The installer hoped for wireless. The Ecobee has that, but some cloud tie-in. You mentioned some other things in the show, but I couldn't find it. Hoping you have a silver bullet recommendation. So this question, Steve, what did we wet finger guess? Did we guess once a quarter ish this comes in?
Yeah, about that.
So here's what we're gonna do. The doc site, which doesn't get nearly enough love, but there is a MK doc site that you can find at docs.mindrep1.com, and the idea here is and was that as we started to establish stuff you were going to people would reference. We could point back as kind of a point in time, and it would be a thing that people could go to in perpetuity to go find information. And so it started with things like, if you wanted to join Mumble for the show, you can go to docs.mindrep1.com/mumble, and it'll give you the instructions for Mumble. I have since gotten to where when we do stuff at Altispeed, so for example, we set up OpenWebUI and Olama for a client. And when we went to do that, I said, hey, when you're writing out the documentation for that, would you also throw a copy up on the doc site? So if any of the listeners of the show want to go set up OpenWebUI and Olama, there's a guide for that. And so there's a guide for that. I struggled to go find out how to my daughter locked herself out of her Graphene OS phone. And I struggled to find the concise step-by-step instructions on how to factory reset the stinking phone on a Google Pixel. How do you reset Graphene OS? And so that's on there. There's a guide on how to set up a matrix server using Ansible, because that's, there's a guide on how to set up OpenVPN, guide to set up how to set up ODP or RDP connections, guide to set up Synology with surveillance stations. I think one of the things we're going to have to get on here is home automation. I have a start on access control, which actually is a direct result of the feedback that I got from the episode. I got inundated with you guys via email and direct message and all manner of things. Everybody was asking me questions about their specific things. So I took all those questions that I answered on a one-on-one basis and just brain dumped it into one gigantic doc and threw that up there. I think a home automation thing for the questions that come in a lot, and this would probably be the top one, likely needs to make an appearance. So we're going to try and do that, and we'll put all of that in there in addition to the show notes. Because we have talked about this a couple of times before, and I'm pretty sure we have them in the show notes, but we'll try to get it into a more discoverable place. So here's the bad part up front. There isn't a great solution here. There should be, I agree with you, and if this show is any evidence at all, there's absolutely a need for a company to come in to make a drop-in thermostat that you plug into your existing thermostat wire, and it talks preferably over Zigbee or Z-Wave to, or preferably both, to Home Assistant and Bob's Your Uncle. That if you wanted one step even better, a hardwired Ethernet connection that then is able to talk to Home Assistant. That would be like the ideal. Unfortunately, no such device exists, and so everything is a bit of a compromise. So let's start here. If you're looking for I want something that I can buy off the internet and plug in with wires, if you asked 10 Home Assistant people, 9 of them would probably tell you if you're looking for a local thermostat, you're probably looking at a company called Venstar. Here's the downside to Venstar. While they are very popular in the Home Assistant world, you're often having to buy them secondhand. So you're going to be on eBay, those sorts of things. If your installer insists on Honeywell, I will tell you that I have a Honeywell Red system in my house. Older generations, and the thermostats themselves are fine because they speak Red Link, so that really doesn't matter. But the little bridge that talks IP, if you can find a Generation 1 version of those don't require the cloud. You just plug it in, plug an Ethernet cable in, it gets an IP address from DHCP. You can log into the thing, assign it, and you can tie it in Home Assistant, and Bob's Your Uncle. But if you once they went to the version, I think it's the version 2, it's a cloud thing, and that's a non-starter for me. Steve, you actually went an interesting route. You were like, nuts to this. I can do your job too. Tell me about that.
So for my fireplace, it was exactly this sort of situation where I was replacing a legacy thermostat with, essentially I got a Shelly 1, the dry contact edition, and I shoved it in the wall and connected the fireplace wires to that. And then in front of that, I actually have it's like a 2-inch Bluetooth temperature sensor in the room. And so when the temperature hits a certain range, the fireplace comes on. When it hits another range, it goes back off. That's all coordinated through Home Assistant. If I was to do it today, I might consider the Shelly wall display. So, I mean, Shelly doesn't pay us. We don't actually have any affiliates with any of the stuff we talk about. I just really like their stuff. I always have. The Shelly wall display, I didn't bring this up on the pre-show, but it actually has an integrated relay in it, Noah. So it's like a tablet that you stick on the wall, but it has an integrated relay in it. And the other thing that the Shelly devices, when they hop on the Wi-Fi together, they can talk to each other over their own scripting language without any sort of central control. So even if you wanted to shove this thing somewhere else in the house and put the Shelly relay wherever the wires for the thermostat are, that would also be something that I would definitely consider that.
The other thing is they can talk to other things directly. So where that proved to be really useful is if you're using like the Orbit panels, they can talk directly to the Shellys without having to have a Home Assistant in the middle of them, which can be helpful for like a backup path, right? And so you can have a thing say, primarily, I want to control all the things and Home Assistant is a central hub, but like when I push this button, I want this button to send this direct command to the Shelly, turn the heat off, turn the heat on, those sorts of things. So you can kind of create that unified one-part experience. But it is a crying shame that something like this doesn't exist. I feel like the Oven-Shalaya Labs might have to take a look at this more seriously, because how can there be this level of need and nobody has risen to the challenge to say, oh, I'll make a Home Assistant native thermostat?
I don't know. Can I drop something else on you for the Shelly?
Absolutely.
So I have a Shelly that is a long distance from the access points. I have an access point near it, but if that access point ever goes down for whatever reason, the Shellys in that area have a long way to get back, and they often can't connect because they don't have like a super good Wi-Fi chip. Why I bring that up? Because you can actually program the Shelly to do specific actions independent of being online or not. And so in this case, one of the things that happens is I've got I've trenched a power cable all the way out to where this Shelly is, but it's at the end of a GFI plug. And if that plug pops and comes back, the Shellys, I often want them to be powered off. I don't want everything to come on at the same time, except that by code where I live, in a building that is an outbuilding, you actually have to have a shut-off switch that disconnects the entire building at the point where the wire comes into the building. Mm-hmm. So I have a Shelly on that, and I want that one to always come on. And the reason why that's also very useful is because when you're tinkering with that one and it's the power in the entire building, that will also take out the Wi-Fi out there.
and the switch and the PoE.
Exactly. And before I figured that out, that was a giant pain in the butt, let me tell you. So now there's a little script that it runs to make sure that guy always comes on.
I love it. So Venstar is an option. Building your own is an option. The used market is an option. There was one other one that we had talked about, but the exact name escapes me. Do you remember what the third one was?
There's the one that I have, which is the Centralite Pearl.
Centralite Pearl. So we'll put links for you in the show notes, Mark, at podcast.asknoahshow.com, and then we'll work to get those on the docs site so we can have kind of an overview of home automation. But I would love, if you have any connection to an industry where you have an in at a company that manufactures thermostats, or if you work for a company that does custom design of small electronics, the thing that bothers me about this is such a low bar to crack. Thermostats, I mean, my gosh, for 40 years, thermostats were a mercury switch that when the mercury heated to a certain thing, it tilted over and closed the circuit, right? I mean, that's as complicated as it was. And that was good enough until we got programmable thermostats. But in the end, they all had to be backwards compatible with this. Essentially, the role you're given is here's the two wires, touch them together when you need the thing to call for heat. So this should not be a hard thing to do. It just requires a little bit of thinking through it. And then really the biggest challenge, I think, would be to design what this guy's looking for his wife, right? She wants to be able to walk up and have a normal interface on a normal thing. And I can relate because my wife, I got the same constraints got put on me. If I told my wife, hey, it's going to do this thing and it's going to do the deal, but you got to open up your phone or you got to go to this website or you got to whatever, she'd be out. She'd be like, nope, no way. And so I was kind of in the same boat. I had to mimic the same experience, and then I could tie into those individual domains, but every domain had to work like as I'm told, a normal person's house. I don't know what that means. Doesn't mean what I want, that's for sure. But I would love to have a better answer to this question because it keeps coming up. Fider writes in and says, hello, Noah and Steve. Commenting on Steve and Tailscale, I can access my full home's network with service and Tailscale without an exit node. I have Tailscale installed on my phone and on my OpenSense router. AdGuard is handling the split DNS on my home network to traffic to route everything. All of my local services are named service.home.domain.aa. I can then access everything from my phone or laptop, tuning Tailscale. Running an exit node has never worked in an iPhone running an exit node has never fully worked in an iPhone for me, but without the exit node, the split DNS and the DNS configs in Tailscale, it works great. Have a great day, Fider. So a little bit of background here, Steve. It's not that the iPhone doesn't work. It's just that it's kind of intermittent and requires a little bit of piddling every once in a while.
Yeah, that's about it. So it works until it doesn't. And then the solution is just to toggle the different exit node. I'd be curious from a technical point of view, how you access things on your LAN that are not part of the tailnet if you don't have the exit node. The whole point of the exit node is to give you access to the LAN as if you are using it like an actual VPN. So I'd be curious how that works because I don't understand how the architecture behind that works, given that the tailnet is only supposed to be able to communicate with other devices on the tailnet, which was the whole point of it.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of May 17th, 2026, here's the Linux and open source news. KDE Plasma 6.6.5 is out. In distro news, Debian 13.5 Trixie is now available. Sparky Linux 8.3 is out. In open source hardware news, the U.S. Department of Energy commissions an open source wind turbine for wake control research. And the auto manufacturer Fisker went bankrupt, and vehicle owners built an open source car association from the ashes. In open source AI news, Linus Torvalds has warned that the Linux security mailing list is now almost entirely unmanageable, since researchers have started using artificial intelligence to flood it with useless reports. And in security news, a new kernel flaw, SSH keysign poon, exposes root access on major distros. Fragnesia has been disclosed by researchers as a new variant of the Dirty Frag family of Linux local privilege escalation vulnerabilities. Shai-Hulud goes open source. The malware creators have posted their own code to GitHub, and independent threat actors have already begun modifying it and expanding its reach. The mini Shai-Hulud malware compromises hundreds of open source packages in a sprawling supply chain attack. And the Dirty Decrypt proof of concept has been released for the Linux kernel. And lastly, in the wake of all the security chaos, OpenBSD 7.9 has been released.
Sachin Mullick, he is the director of product management, OpenShift Virtualization, and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah show. We had the opportunity to meet Sachin at Red Hat Summit. Steve and I were both there last week. It was an absolute blast. He joins us on the program. Welcome in, sir. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for making the time. So you are one of the subject matter experts on OpenShift Virtualization, so I'm excited to get the opportunity to talk to you. Can you talk to me a little bit about the VMware Broadcom acquisition, specifically Red Hat's strategy to aggressively go after and capture what has become a huge market share in the virtualization market with OpenShift Virtualization?
Sure. So actually, a lot of people are not aware of this, but Red Hat is the company behind KVM. So back in 2007, 2008, Red Hat decided to go into the virtualization space with a hypervisor, and they bought the company behind KVM, which is called Kubernetes. So Red Hat has been on a long journey on the virtualization front, but around like 2016, 17, like Kubernetes was taking off, and they had this vision at Red Hat that everything will need this scale, this automation as the world goes around, and brought in this KVM layer back into OpenShift. So we have been on this journey a long while before the VMware Broadcom acquisition that you were talking about. What really happened after that is customers started coming to us and saying, like, we know you do virtualization, but we need to make sure the platform is managed the same way that we are used to from a hypervisor perspective, more ClickOpsy type of environment, and also more around an ecosystem of partners. And that's where we pivoted based on customer demand the last 2-3 years. And we have almost the entire UXD department, we call the usability department. They have pivoted to figure out what do we need in the product so that it can give you like a ClickOps experience. And this March, we actually introduced a single pane of glass to manage across all clusters. Same thing if you look at from a ecosystem perspective, all the backup vendors are now integrated. Commvault just made an announcement. So now backup, storage, DR, these were all the things that customers were asking. So from our perspective, what we really have been doing is listening to customer demand and building out the things that were not there. And at this point, we feel like anybody can bring any type of workload. Between having VMs and containers, we are going to be the platform they can live with for the next 20 years.
So it seems like there's an open source story that is winning here by way of, talk to me a little bit about what the difference is or what you were able to leverage from your experience with KVM and the traditional virtualization and how that natively integrates into OpenShift virtualization.
Definitely. So one of the great things about being at Red Hat is, as you said, the open source nature of it. And everything that we do is upstream first. So we do not put out a release unless we have the upstream component ready. And that helps us to build out things with the community. So KVM, if you look at it, we are very active there, as you know. So we have various organizations participating there. Same thing we are doing with like KubeVirt, which is the upstream community for OpenShift virtualization. And that's the glue layer between Kubernetes and KVM. So we need both. What happens a lot of times, my product management team actually owns both the RHEL KVM and the OpenShift virtualization. So we sometimes have to wait for like a base feature to go into KVM. Say there's some Windows driver or there's some other feature around, say, memory tiering that will need a component in the KVM. And then we can build the manageability and the glue into OpenShift on top. So it works out very beautifully having like upstream in both components because vendors are getting involved. The same as we talked about backup, like we are working on functionality for incremental backup, and half of it is what we deliver. It's the layer that can provide our vendors a way to get what blocks have changed. But then who is the consumer? It is the backup vendor, which can actually see what blocks change, and then they can build the incremental backup on top. And all that's happening in upstream, and that gives it a momentum, which things which would take like 8-10 years in the past world, we are getting it out in 6 months, a year, which is basically unheard of and only possible due to the upstream nature of how we do this work.
I'm glad that you mentioned the upstream work. So there's somebody that is listening to the show and they're running VMware ESXi at home or for a small business, not a large enterprise. Would you say that OpenShift virtualization is a realistic option for them, or is it really only sized for large-scale organizations?
Yeah, so in OpenShift virtualization, we do have very large customers, like you said, but at the same time, like we support it on a single node, so you can run it on a single node or even two nodes now with what we have introduced. A lot of that goes in the edge, but we do get a lot of mid-sized customers, and a lot of it is because what you are talking about in terms of innovations we brought. So one of them was this whole ClickOps experience. So from an end customer perspective, they're getting an ease of experience of managing things they are used to, but at the same time, they're building the DNA. Like if you think about AI tooling and all, a lot of it is Kubernetes based. So it's a way of introducing yourself safely to what the whole world's gonna need it to survive. So it's an easy way to jump in and then grow with it. So definitely, I would say what you need is not the size of a customer, but a willingness to learn. Like if you're willing to learn, like some things will change, whether even if you put like a button in there, you still have to learn like, okay, there's this new way of managing things, but that new way applies to containers, to AI. So that's a great learning path. And if you're willing to go on it, you can be very small, you can be mid-size. All of them are going to be successful on it.
And it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's worth investing in those skills because it gives you a wide domain knowledge. So you can learn those skills, you can apply them across a wide domain. Talk to me a little bit. You've mentioned ClickOps a couple of times. Pardon my ignorance. Well, how would you describe ClickOps? What is that?
Sure. So in the Kubernetes world, what people call it as declarative infrastructure. So basically, you take a file like a YAML file and you describe how your environment should look like. And then the good part about it is it basically when you apply it to your infrastructure, it will keep it exactly the same way. Like you can't go and just make a change and then suddenly it's different than what it was. But in the VM world, a lot of people are used to going and actually clicking on buttons or things and saying, okay, I want to increase my memory from 50 gig to 100 gig, right? So that's done through a user interface. So that's more ClickOps. The beauty about OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization is you can do that through the user interface, but it will generate you a YAML file in the backend. So if you are coming from the world where you're used to just going in, clicking buttons or clicking on the UI screen and doing things, you can still do that. It will generate you the YAML file. You can over time start learning what's in there and then directly start making changes there if you want to, and then go more towards the declarative style of managing.
Think about how I want to set this question up. Is the declarative style more driven by developers, and is the ClickOps more driven by system administrators, and are you finding a crossroads there?
Yeah, definitely. So like basically, if you think about it, the developer experience is about scripting, writing code, and infrastructure admins have used command line shells or have used user interfaces to do. But then there's this intersection of the two happening, right? So it's like infrastructure as code, as it's called. That's been a trend in the industry, which is accelerating. Now with AI coming in, like everybody is coding, like down to like even somebody like me as a product management person, I love the ability to go in and start coding again. It's going up to the C level. So a lot of what we are talking about intersects with the ability to make changes and also to be able to experiment and get to a better place fairly quickly. So both worlds are intersecting, and that's what you're seeing over here.
What would you say the number one misconception people have about OpenShift Virtualization, particularly before they've maybe used it, before they have hands-on? What are some of the impressions that you hear that you're like, that's just not accurate?
Yeah, so OpenShift Virtualization, actually, if I go back in time, like 2 or 3 years back, the number one question we would get is, can you do live migration or vMotion in VMware World? And the reason was because containers are stateless. So basically, it's like the pets versus cattle thing, where if something dies on one end, you just restart more container pods and it's fine. With VMs, they are running your databases or something which is very important. You can't really bring it down. So you need to move it from one node to the other. And that concept is what was there from the very beginning, because as I said, we are doing a hypervisor layer, not containers in this case. So that was the beginning part where there was a misconception, because we are known for containers, like they thought VMs behave like containers and it should only be stateless workloads. The world's largest banks are running OpenShift virtualization for, and there's mission critical applications, including going to space where there's human cargo involved. So you can't really have these kind of behavior. So that was number one. The other one, which I would say was in some way an honest thing, was, as I was saying, like a lot of our management was geared towards containers. So over the last couple of years, what we realized is, for us to be successful, we have to meet where customers are. And that's why we invested a lot in building out the user interface. And not only, I think we were successful enough that we launched a SKU that's only for virtualization customers, which nobody could have thought like 2 years back. So what this means is, we are not expecting you to run even a single container if you're coming in with this SKU, which is called OpenShift Virtualization Engine, and still be successful. And that's where I think that journey completed, where we can give you that usability of what you're used to, but not have to worry about having to re-platform if you want to start adding containers. All you have to do is change your SKU, and now you're getting the benefits of both.
There is a bit of a philosophical tension that I'm hoping you can kind of address. And that philosophical tension is between this idea of critical VM investments and protecting them and trying to create a path to modernization. Can you balance those two for me?
Yeah, so it varies by customer and where they are on that journey. As with any IT organization, like the IT doesn't own the applications. The applications are owned by the business owners or the application providers. So there are two paths that can work. One is, if you're migrating out from your current hypervisor, this is an opportunity, I call it, not just a cost. So there's a lot of application vendors who have built out containerized applications. And why would you even do that? Why would you change that something that's working and go into a containerized world? A lot of times the reason is one of two. One is it becomes a lightweight resource. So especially now that shortage of hardware is happening, if you could run something more lightweight, that's in your advantage. You're not paying like 3x, 4x on the hardware cost. The other is microservices has some inherent benefits for a platform application. Like if you want to change your shopping cart and leave the rest of your application around, with containerization, it's just change that one component. So that's like the stuff that attracts people. But it has to be at the application team's choice. Are they ready for it? Then they can go for it. The benefits are there. The good part is, if you're in one platform that does it all, you don't have to rush it and do it day one. You can choose your path and over time get to where you want to be.
Can you address if we talk about containerizing VM workloads, are we actually modernizing, or are we just taking the same problem and putting it into a different box?
Yeah, so again, it is just changing your hypervisor isn't going to buy you something. Like when you're containerizing, we talked about this concept of DevOps, right? So are you starting to use concepts like CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous development and continuous integration? So you have to look at not just the place where you're keeping this information, but how are you using it in your life cycle of application management? So that's where I would say, like, don't just look at, I take this one thing and convert. What am I doing from a process perspective? What am I doing from people actually understanding those processes? So there's a learning curve which needs to apply to all three. And all three, the best way to do that is like experiment, find some low-hanging fruits, see the benefits. Of course, we have a lot of white papers that show how other people have done it. You can look at those case studies, but the best way is to do it on your own. Take like a sample application, go through it, see what it's doing, hone your processes like your ServiceNow integrations. There's a lot that goes into an application, and it's not just container or VM. So go through the whole process. If you like it, you're going to get hooked to it, and you'll say this is the only way to do it.
So you kind of started down this path earlier. We were talking a little bit about there's some complexity that comes with managing containers. And anytime you use a new tool, you should expect the things to be in a different place. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me a little bit about what day two looks like? So day one, you're getting set up. You've got Kubernetes. It's this powerful thing. It's operationally complex. It's awesome. But what does day two look like by way of backups and live migration and network policy and storage from people that are coming from a traditional hypervisor? You talked a little bit about there's been some forward momentum in the industry with other vendors. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. So just staying on the virtualization aspect. So if you're coming from a different hypervisor, as we talked about, like there is network, storage, compute, and then you build your applications on top, but you also need your backup and your disaster recovery. And so that's where you need to look at how are you doing things today in today's world. And in some cases, you actually want to keep the same stack. So maybe your storage vendor, you are completely happy with them. Now you have built-in integrations over the last 20 years. So a hypervisor change doesn't mean you have to do a storage change. You could say you're working with NetApp. They have great integration with us. Same with Dell. Any of the top partners like Hitachi and all. You can just bring them. You can add in. They have this component called CSI layer, which basically takes their underlying storage and makes it available into Kubernetes. And then you can use it with your VMs. You start looking at backup. So there is definitely an advantage of staying with your current backup vendor. You may have policies of retention for X number of years. So you can bring those same vendors in, and they have integration into OpenShift Virtualization. So those are the two areas which a lot of times may benefit just by staying with what you have. And then you start looking at, like, do I need Crunch, Cockroach DB, or some cloud native way of doing databases? And you start adding those over time. So this is like a journey. Look at the whole thing, but don't try to change the whole world on day one.
Do you have a home lab in your house for you to play on and kind of dev on?
So the interesting thing is, like, what I have is actually coming from our engineering. They have created this cluster which is always on the latest and greatest, and it's available to actually even the field can access it. And what that helps is if I have my own home lab, I would be doing things at a smaller scale. But because this development cluster which they made available to me is being used by a lot of developers and other people. Now, if I demo it, say, to a customer something, I'm actually showing them real-world usage. And we do find a lot of things before our customers because of that. Like, say, we are trying to upgrade, and we have like 1,000 VMs running on this, and there's some issue. That's going to start doing. So I don't have my own cluster, but I'm enamored by the cluster that my engineering team has given me access to.
How about community resources? People want to learn more about OpenShift. Where would they go to either read documentation, tutorials, classes, those sorts of things?
Yeah, so actually, from a learning perspective, there's several things available. Like we have the OpenShift sandbox that's available, which won't be in your home lab, but you can actually experiment resources that Red Hat's providing. Then we start looking at actual learning. We have something we just introduced. We call it like the 5-minute video series. So a lot of our customers want to just, on this topic, I want a quick 5-minute tutorial. And that's what we started. There are some longer videos like YouTube. Andrew Sullivan, who's my colleague, does an Ask the OpenShift admin. And there's a lot of OpenShift virtualization content that was produced on top of that. And then the next level is we have demos available, two types. One is a demo which is called an interactive demo. So you can go and basically you start clicking and it will show you, say, how does cross-cluster live migration work. Even if you're at a home lab, you'll need 2 of these setups to do the live migration across 2 clusters, so that you can do it without really setting up. But we also have like demos which are bigger and like you can go through them. And then the last thing would be if you're really now starting to get serious, Red Hat has certification courses, and a lot of that education is online now. So you could become an OpenShift Virtualization certified admin, and you can decide whether you want to take the test or not, but you could go through the whole coursework, and then you'll be as good as anybody using OpenShift Virtualization today.
Sachin Mullick, he is the Director of Product Management for OpenShift Virtualization and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah. So, Sachin, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it. We'll get you back in the program soon.
Thank you so much, Noah. It's been great talking to you.
So, Dory is a small sign that, like many e-English display, is easy on the eyes because it doesn't use bright lighting. You control the display through a free iOS or Android app that doesn't force you to share your email or your name to use it. The app has clear sections for editing the header, the main text, the footer, adding an image, choosing a background, all of the things. Here's the thing that I think is so exciting about the Dory. The Dory CEO claims that the $149 signs won't be bricked in the event that Dory goes out of business. So we have a number of different examples. Smart TVs that insist on sending your activities to track you, smart fridges that use the internet to cycle through ads, gym equipment that won't work offline, toothbrushes that batteries drain too quickly, or virtually any gadget that forces you to be minimally effective with an otherwise unimpressive app. And so these guys are taking a different approach. It's a 1280 by 720 display, 5.2 inches, a 1900 milliwatt or milliamp battery, and a small little e-ink display. So, Steve, I'm going to guess that this is probably not high on your list for you don't need e-ink displays around your house. But what do you think about a company finally calling a thing and saying, hey, we're going to make sure that in the event that we go under, you have the ability to continue to use the thing that you paid for?
I mean, I personally support companies that do that sort of thing. So I go out of my way to put dollars behind companies that do the right thing.
Am I crazy to think that this is a bit of an outlier in the industry and that most companies are interested in like the opposite? They're like, hey, we want the thing to stop working so that you got to go buy another one. And so these guys are kind of doing something out of the norm, or am I just looking at the wrong companies?
You know, I can't really say, to be honest with you. I haven't looked in this. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if the model continues to be trying to push the upgrade cycle so that they continue to make money on the hardware.
Absolutely. So we'll have a link for you in the show notes. You can check it out, podcast.asknoahshow.com. There you'll find a link to all of the articles and references that we cover in the show. And so if you want to check out the Dory or purchase one, let me know what you think of it. The music in our ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. You can catch the show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. We record it at AskNoahShow.com. Want to keep up to date to the latest? Follow us. He's at Linux Ovens. I'm at Kernel Linux. I'm also, for the first time in a long time, started posting on Mastodon. So you can follow me there. NoahC.us. That's the best place to keep track of all the things. We're back next week, 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com.